Listen guys, the math is really simple. More subscribers equal more views equals more popularity, and more popularity means I'll have a much better chance of convincing my wife to let me keep making these videos. So you know exactly what you need to do. You need to go hit that subscribe button right now. What is going on, boys? Welcome back to Ran When Parked. Now, I know I haven't made a video for you in a minute, and that's because my professional career has been a little bit hectic lately, but nonetheless, we're back, better than ever, working on the Landcruiser today. As you can see, I'm sitting in it right now, and we are still on a road to get this thing yard driving a little bit this year, before winter comes. So, I got a lot to do today. Shifter mount, radiator support, coolant lines, and some other general fabrication stuff. So let's get to work. All right, guys, so today we've got a brand new aluminum radiator going in. By the way, quick tech tip: when you get your fancy brand new aluminum radiator, cut some cardboard and cover up the fins. Do yourself a favor, because otherwise it's going to look like crap by the time you put it in the first time. Obviously, the box it came in is always a good candidate for that. We also have a brand new TCI shifter, which is just a generic TH350 automatic shifter, nothing fancy, because I don't need anything fancy. And somewhere around here, right here, we have enough parts to make the entire transmission line setup. So up to the cooler, and this radiator has a cooler built in down on the bottom there. So first things first, we're going to do the radiator support. Now, first problem with this radiator support, and maybe something I pointed out before, this Landcruiser is a mixture of a bunch of different years. Now, there is a major breaking point in the years, 1976, when they went to disc brakes. So this is a disc brake front axle, so we know this is a 76 or newer front axle. This is, I believed, to be a 76 or newer frame, because the taillights in the rear kind of distinguish that. And I thought that this radiator support, which I had out in my scrap metal pile, was off a 1980 Landcruiser that I had years ago. So that would have made it matching to this frame, but it's not. So these are the radiator support mounts right there. And obviously you can see that the mounts on the bottom of the radiator are much wider than the mounts in the frame. So obviously I'm not cutting off the mounts in the frame. It would be a whole lot easier to just put some new bolts into the radiator bracket and just do it that way. So I want this to be able to come out with the radiator, so I don't want it just bolted. I want those welded in, because otherwise you'd have to take the radiator out to get at the top of the bolt. So first thing we're going to do is just cut up this thing, cut the old bolts out, and then weld in some new bolts and get some mounts so it sits into those brackets correctly, and then we'll move forward from there. All right, so radiator support and radiator are in. However, there are a couple little issues here. It sits a little higher than I expected it to. It is right. I mean, the hood line is correct. The hood will cover it, so it's sitting just the way it would from the factory. However, I don't see how I can put a hose on this and not run it into the fan. Maybe I could get like a really tight corner, or I could hardline it, or I could cut that off and just TIG weld an elbow on. Those are all options. But I might just get rid of the mechanical fan, go to an electric fan. I actually have one here somewhere that I could put on there, and that would solve that problem. The second thing is I have the tranny cooler lines down here, and these are a really weird thread. They are a G-quarter, which is like a British pipe thread, and they use a seal. So I had to convert that to NPT and then convert that to 6AN, so that adapter is going to stick out pretty far. And by the time I put the 90 on it, this fan might get in the way there too. But we're going to find out about that very soon. Now, the last thing is, if I stick with the mechanical fan, it does sit low. So like the center line of the fan is down well below the center line of the radiator, so I'm wasting a lot of CFM that's just, you know, pulling air through the bottom and not doing anything. So I think like a big electric fan might be more efficient anyway. And I'm pretty sure I left the fan trigger grounds in this harness when I did it. Yeah, so I got fan ground right there. The only question would be whether or not when I had the PCM tuned, I left the fan trigger in, because I was intending all along to do a mechanical fan. So we'll cross all those bridges soon. It doesn't really matter right now because I can obviously run it with no fan, just the radiator for some amount of time. So that's in. Next thing is going to be tranny cooler lines. So let's get working on those. So now for the tranny cooler lines, like I mentioned, that looks like this. So what we have here is G-quarter British pipe thread to 1/4 inch NPT to 6AN, and then with a 90 that'll go to the stainless steel braided line. And when it's actually put into the radiator, that looks like this. So that sticks out really far. However, it does clear the fan, so that would work on a strictly technical basis. But there's a couple problems here. So the depth of the thread in the radiator, this thing is bottomed out, and maybe you can see, maybe you can't really focus in on that. It's bottomed out, but the washer's not tight, so that means the depth of the thread in the radiator is not deep enough for that fitting. Second thing, this NPT fitting here, that's the NPT to 6AN converter, is also bottomed out in that brass fitting. So the threads on this brass fitting are too deep on one end and too shallow on the other for either side to actually seal up. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to cut the end off this brass fitting, probably about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more, so it'll actually go in there and seal. And then I'm going to cut about the same amount off this fitting, and that'll actually shorten us up about 1/4 of an inch, so it'll fit even better. So I might be able to keep the mechanical fan after all. It's just going to be down to getting that to work. So let's cut that off, and then we'll mock it up again, and then we can start making lines. Alright guys, so these are done. They look great. I just test fitted them in the radiator. They seal up perfectly fine. Now, doing NPT threads is much sketchier because they're tapered, so if you go too far, it won't start. So I'm just going to take like 50 thou off of this at a time and then double check it in there and make sure that they fit right. So start turning those. Alright, so all done with that. We have a lot more room now. Actually, I could keep the mechanical fan, even though it's only like 1/4 of an inch away, so maybe I'm not too comfortable with that anyway. Anyway, next thing we need to do is just hook up to the trans side, which are down there. For that, I have these cool little adapters from ICT Billet to go from the straight thread with the seal to -6AN. Then some 45-degree Russell hose ends, and we're going to run stainless braided line right down the frame rail here from the front to the back. And then we'll be done with that and moving on to the next thing. All right, so we are done with the tranny lines. They come out nice, stay away from the exhaust, come up over the frame right here, and they clear everything pretty good right into the radiator. So that's all set. Next thing we're gonna do is work on this shifter situation. So like I mentioned in the first place, I got a new TCI shifter here. And when I'm sitting in this thing, the position's pretty good here, but I think I gotta pick it up like maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches, something like that. And then I also got to figure out where it'll fit with my wife in here. So I got to make sure the seat will move forward. I think it'll probably work fine. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is make a base plate for it that hits all the mounting points out of sheet metal. And then we'll turn that into like a 2-inch standoff, so it like lifts it up like that. And then we got to figure out how the cable works. And that'll be pretty much the end of that. So let's start making the base plate and we'll move forward from there. All right, so shifter is completely installed. Everything went pretty well. Obviously, I didn't show all of it on camera, but most of it was just adjusting the cable underneath the truck, which is kind of monotonous and difficult to film anyway. So first, second, third, drive, neutral, reverse, and park. So everything works, it's adjusted well, the transmission seems to shift well. Now you guys probably noticed that I didn't end up building like a sheet metal spacer to move it up like I said I was going to. And that is because this TCI shifter comes with 1-inch spacers under it. So I just mocked it up like that. I was pretty comfortable with the position. I brought my wife out here to, move the seat where she would sit. She was pretty comfortable with the position, so I just kept it, which worked out nice because the plastic cover fits perfectly tight to the tunnel. So dodged a bullet there. That worked out really nice. So next thing I can do with this tunnel is I got to fill this existing shifter hole. Obviously, this was a probably 3-speed before, maybe a 4-speed. They switched in 1975 on these things. So I got to fill that. And then I got to put the transfer case levers in here, which I think we're going to talk about right now because I feel like there's going to be some more time on this video, so I might as well yank this thing out and we'll start messing with the 4-wheel drive shifter, the transfer case selector. So let's get to that. All right, so this is the original four-wheel drive selector on these things, and these things initially from the factory were double action, so you had like a side-to-side movement like this, and then you had a forward-backward movement. I think, if I remember right, the side-to-side is high-low range, forward-backward is four-wheel drive, two-wheel drive. So the problem with this one is that the forward-backward movement is seized up. And just taking a look at how this thing's put together, if I had to guess, this plate is probably threaded. This is not the original plate, because this thing has the TH350 in it, and this would bolt to that. So this is not the original mount that would have been on the Toyota 4Speed. This is definitely different, but it is like the same shifter components, I think. So it's kind of a weird mix of parts, but I imagine this is just supposed to be a jam nut, and you're not supposed to tighten this bolt down very far, because then it's just pinching this whole system. So I guess I'm going to just rip this thing apart real quick and sandblast it, and then we'll come back. All right, so all our parts are blasted. Everything looks pretty good. And my first inkling was correct that this thing is threaded right here. So what was happening was this bolt was going through here. Actually, it goes that way. And it was just tightened down really, really far right into the plate, and then the jam nut was put on the other side. And what you would really need to do is tighten it down not very tight into the plate and then put the jam nut on. And that's why the jam nut is even there, so you can keep some, you know, a little bit of play on this side so it actually swivels. And it's got a grease fitting on it too, so that's probably a halfway decent system. Anyway, the next thing we need to do here is disconnect this shifter that we just put in, take the trans tunnel out, and that'll have us with some access, so it'll look like this, which makes it a lot easier to get at all this stuff. And also I learned a valuable lesson that you cannot take the trans tunnel out with the driver's seat in. Small oversight on my part. Now, I think we're gonna have some problems because this linkage is right down here. That's the high-low, I guess it would be. And it doesn't really move at all. I mean, it moves a little bit, but I have another transfer case sitting out back, and it moves really, really easy with my hands on it, so it's seized up. And also right here, which is engaging the front drive, that's supposed to move in and out relatively easily, and that one doesn't move either. So I think this transmission's had or transfer case, that is, has had a rough life. So we're still going to mock this plate up and see where the shifter would sit, because I am curious about that, whether or not the factory system's even going to work, or if I have to go like a twin stick and move it all forward. I don't really know. So let's see if we can get this thing bolted up real quick. All right, so that's what it looks like in there. That's how that whole thing fits. And you can see what it does is goes back and forth, and that moves this linkage right here. And then it goes forward and backward, and it moves this linkage down here. So it's double action in that way. Now, there's a couple problems. First and foremost, this location is never going to work because it hits the seat. So I can't even really move it in the direction it needs to go. And secondly, I'm pretty sure this transmission is smoked because when I move this back and forth, it is barely moving that linkage. It really doesn't want to work at all. I mean, I can get it to move a little bit, but it's not like a positive engagement. And then forward and backward is even worse. It has no movement whatsoever. So I think this transmission is completely frozen up. And the reason why I say I think it's completely frozen up is because the one out of the parts truck, I can get positive engagement out of this stuff with my hands. It's real simple. So I'm pretty sure what that's going to mean is we're going to be going through a transfer case rebuild, probably on the other transfer case, and then we'll put it in this one. So with that development, probably the next thing we're going to have to do here is pull the motor, trans, and transfer case. I was going to do that anyway, just to degrease it, do a pan gasket on both the motor and trans, probably a rear main on the motor while I'm at it, because it's leaking oil everywhere. And then we'll put it back in, move forward from there with brakes, steering, I guess that's about it. A couple other things, throttle pedal. And then we'll be driving it. So you will see that and more on the next episode of Ran One Parked. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.